Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Identifying Effective Endpoint Detection and Response Platforms. My name is Raleigh Gould and I'll be the moderator for today's event. Our featured speaker is Steve Brazen, Research Director at Enterprise Management Associates. Steve's career at EMA follows 20 years of in-the-trenches experience in IT system support, engineering, and management for high technology, telecommunications, and financial institutions. And before I hand things over to Steve, I wanted today's audience to know that we will be concluding today's presentation by taking your questions. Feel free to log them anytime by using the Q&A functionality. Also, today's event is being recorded, and you will receive a follow-up email from EMA that will include the on-demand playback, a PDF of Steve's slides, as well as a white paper on today's topic. So I do hope that you will check that out. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our featured speaker, Steve Brazen. Steve?
Thank you very much, Raleigh, and thank you all for joining us today for our discussion on how to identify effective endpoint detection and response solutions. Now, if you're considering adopting an EDR platform, then you've come to the right place because we'll be taking a deep dive into the requirements and optimal approaches to EDR solutions. In particular, I'm very excited to be able to present to you results from our own evaluation comparing two of the most popular EDR solutions on the market today, Tanium and Tachyon. This will provide you with an example of how to conduct your own evaluation as well as to identify the key capabilities and considerations you should include in your own review. First, here's a quick look at the agenda for our discussion. We'll start by reviewing how endpoint security and management requirements have radically evolved over the past few years and identify the most critical and emerging challenges to securely enabling end-user productivity. This will set the stage for us to discuss the value and importance of adopting an EDR platform. We'll talk about the best practices and key technologies employed by EDR solutions to provide you with a better understanding of exactly why this class of solutions have become so popular. Next, we'll talk about how to identify the EDR platform that will best fit your own organization's unique requirements, and I'll share with you the methodology that we used to conduct our own independent and objective review. Now, following that, I will be delighted to share with you the results of our evaluation with detailed side-by-side comparisons of Tanium and Tachyon. And finally, I'll wrap up the presentation with just a few key conclusions on adopting EDR solutions and then open up the discussion to answer some of your questions. It should be no surprise that we live in an IT-centric world. No modern-day business can survive without availability of IT services to drive workforce productivity and business operations. Across every industry sector, the ability of businesses to meet organizational goals is broadly dependent on the use of a wide variety of IT resources, including applications, data, email, messaging, collaboration tools, and many other business-hosted services. However, over the last decade or so, two fundamental changes in end-user computing have radically changed the way IT resources are accessed and utilized by enterprises around the world. The first is accelerating requirements for supporting workforce mobility. Now, certainly the rapid adoption and use of mobile devices to perform business tasks was a key driver for this. But equally disruptive was an increase in telecommuting, outsourcing, and other conditions requiring remote access to business services. The second substantial change in end-user computing emerged from a rapid adoption of cloud-hosted services. No longer were business applications, data, email, and other IT services securely protected behind a company firewall, but rather have become distributed across both private and public cloud hosting environments. So as a result of these two technological forces, workforce mobility and distributed cloud services, end-user computing environments have radically expanded beyond the control of enterprise networks and traditional client lifecycle management solutions. In fact, workforces are now demanding unprecedented access to business resources from a variety of different devices used at a wide variety of different locations at any given time. This on-demand model of IT service delivery is placing enormous pressures on IT managers required to meet organizational requirements and service level agreements. Traditionally, IT support organizations have been responsible for the continuous availability and reliable performance of endpoint devices, applications, data stores, network resources, and IT services. However, these requirements have been overshadowed by accelerating requirements for enforcing security policies. This is a particular challenge because any enhanced security processes that are introduced may not inhibit end-user productivity or diminish their work experiences. End users should be able to focus on completing job tasks rather than jumping through hoops to meet security policies or accessing IT resources. As if all of this wasn't difficult enough, IT support organizations are increasingly taking on the burden of having to achieve requirements for regulatory compliance. According to EMA Primary Research, 95% of all businesses are currently required to meet some regulatory commitments. Many of these are industry-wide requirements, for instance, HIPAA regulations for healthcare institutions, Six Sigma for manufacturing, and GLBA for financial organizations. Others are more generally applied to a wide variety of businesses. For example, PCI applies to any organization that takes credit or debit cards, and Sarbanes-Oxley, or SOX, applies to any publicly traded company in the United States. A more recent and disruptive addition is GDPR, which has gone into effect in Europe, requiring businesses to provide data protection and privacy for individuals in that region who actually access those resources online. While individual regulations can vary widely with each of these compliance initiatives, a common thread that binds all of them is a need for comprehensive security controls. As I mentioned earlier, business requirements for ensuring the security of IT resources has actually become the primary challenge for IT support organizations. Partly this is driven by regulatory compliance, but more broadly this is to protect businesses from the disastrous results of a security breach. In fact, respondents to one of our recent surveys where we surveyed knowledgeable IT managers from more than 200 organizations crossing a variety of industry verticals and horizontals, it indicated that ensuring the security of IT services was at the top of every IT management priority that we investigated anyway. It was identified as the most difficult to manage, the most time-consuming, the most expensive, and according to surveyed end users, it was the greatest inhibitor to workforce productivity. In an attempt to reduce the impacts of breach events, many organizations are adopting one-dimensional approaches to IT security, such as basic virus protection software that leaves gaping holes in their security perimeter and are unable to address emerging attack vectors. Layering on these security point solutions also has resulted in added layers of complexity to management processes, actually reducing the effectiveness of security administration and policy achievement, placing most businesses at extreme risk. But you don't have to take my word for it. Just pick up a newspaper or read something online, because hardly a week goes by that you won't see an article about the latest shocking security breach. And those aren't just small businesses, but often large corporations that you would expect would employ only the highest levels of security. In just the last year or so, Yahoo was breached twice, exposing access to more than 1 billion accounts. Uber had a data breach that exposed access to 57 million customers and drivers. In January of this year, the children's toy manufacturer VTech was a victim of a cyber attack that exposed the personal data of roughly 6.4 million children worldwide. And you're undoubtedly aware that the credit reporting agency Equifax was hacked, exposing the personal information of 143 million people, including credit card numbers, social security numbers, birth dates, addresses, and other personal identification information. Other companies that experienced major security breaches just in the last year include Google Mail, eBay, River City Media, Verifone, Dun & Bradstreet, Saks Fifth Avenue, UNC Healthcare, Arby's, Chipotle, Sonic, Sabra, Brook Brothers, DocuSign, Kmart, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Verizon, Hyatt Hotels, the U.S. Securities and Stock Exchange Commission, and many, many others. I just don't have time to list them all. And the damage that can be done here is real and can be devastating to businesses of any size. Just a few of the potential risky outcomes include the risk of someone stealing your users' identities, the loss of business reputation, significant profit loss and the loss of customers, and inability to meet regulatory commitments. And any of these can result in the direct financial losses, such as to pay out fines and lawsuits. While there isn't time to discuss every type of security risk, I want to cover just a few of the most insidious and impactful threats that have been emerging recently. What we have traditionally considered to be malware has been evolving. Hackers have figured out ways to work around traditional security technologies like first-generation sandboxes and signature-based gateways. We call this evasive malware for its ability to evade the most common malware protection approaches. These attacks are constantly changing. Every time a security solution provider adds a new feature to address an evasive malware, hackers change the approach to something else. It's like trying to herd cats. Malware attacks are also becoming more targeted, where in the past attacks were designed to cast a wide net to try and grab as many users as they could fool into drinking their poison. Now they are being designed with a purpose. They may specifically target a particular company or industry or even a user's personal attributes. Since targeted attacks only affect a limited number of targets, it's less likely that they will be identified as threats by traditional malware protection software. Malware has actually become a big business unto itself. While most people think of attackers as a teenager sitting in mom's basement surrounded by home computing equipment and a bunch of stale pizza boxes, it's actually a serious salaried position in many countries, in particular Russia, China, and India. These businesses have even spawned malware-as-a-service platforms that operate as SaaS models to provide targeted malware attacks. With just a little bit of knowledge, any of you could right now go out onto the dark web and purchase a malware-as-a-service solution that will customize an attack to perform any mischief you desire. For the right price, anyone could use malware-as-a-service to steal secrets from a business competitor or interfere in foreign government elections or influence financial markets. I know this sounds like the stuff of tinfoil hat conspiracy theories, but it's all actually happening. I mean, seriously, it's very well documented, and you can look it up. Of course, I can't talk about the evolving threat landscape without specifically discussing ransomware. Over the last 2 years or so, damage costs resulting from ransomware attacks increased a whopping 1,500%. Clearly, this has become the tool of choice for hackers. WannaCry has arguably attained the most infamous reputation, but this is actually only one of what can be considered a new class of ransomware threats that encrypt key system data until a fee is paid to unlock and re-enable access. Other modern variations of ransomware include Petya and Locky and Crisis and Bad Rabbit and a number of others. The differences between the types of ransomware involves the method they use to trick users into downloading the encryption software, and the types of files on the endpoint devices that are being encrypted, and the method used to collect payments for re-enabling the access. What makes all of these ransomware approaches dangerous is that they are almost completely invisible to traditional signature-based antivirus and malware protection solutions. And actually, across the board, it is reasonable to say that signature-based malware protection is no longer effective at preventing breach events. Put simply, a signature is a characteristic of a piece of malware. It could be a changed registry setting or a redirected web link or a modified code or something as simple as a text string in a startup script. Providers of malware protection solutions monitor the internet for new malware threats and then add a signature to an ever-growing library of known threats. When your computer runs a virus scan, it checks to see if any of those signatures appear on your system. Now, the obvious problem with this approach is the lag time between when the malware is first released and when endpoint computers are updated with the new signature list. In most organizations, this time period can run between 60 and 90 days, while some endpoints are not updated for more than a year or possibly never. During this lag time, these devices are susceptible to what are called zero-day attacks, or malware which has not yet had a signature catalog. Even worse is the fact that modern-day malware is designed to change or morph into new forms. so that there is a constant, so that there is no consistent signature for malware protectors to identify. Similarly, encrypted files, such as used in ransomware, can't be read at all by malware protection software since it doesn't have the encryption key. Traditional signature-based malware packages are a type of reactive security management because they only identify threats that are known and documented. As with so many things in life, the real dangers come from the unknown threats. All of these dangers we've been talking about point to a failure of traditional security management solutions, principally because they are reactive in nature. This is resulting in direct, quantifiable costs to business budgets and performance. Breach events result in low-performing or unusable systems, the loss of sensitive business data, and an encryption of critical resources held for ransom. Resolving these problems takes valuable time away from IT administrators who would be more effective focusing on business improvements and new service introductions. Additionally, while compromised systems are being remediated, the affected users are not being productive, which could affect service to customers, or the completion of business-critical tasks, or the achievement of new market opportunities. The processes for cleaning effective systems can themselves also be costly, since organizations may have to invest in multiple remediation tools or hire expert consultants. Rather than wasting time, money, and effort putting out security breach fires, the better approach is to ensure the fires never get set in the first place. And this is what it means to be proactive. The key to enabling proactive security and endpoint management is establishing processes for the immediate identification and remediation of problems and potential breaches. To be effective, these processes must operate in real time, responding to incidences as they occur rather than just after weekly or monthly scans. In addition to preventing known threats, a comprehensive approach to endpoint security must also identify previously unknown threats to combat zero-day vulnerabilities and changing attack vectors. This is accomplished by continuously monitoring endpoint devices and then utilizing some intelligence, such as analytics, to determine potential risks based on the state, behavior, and contextual usage of endpoint devices and IT services. When risk levels are determined to cross an established threshold, alerts can be sent to administrators, connections to business services can be severed, devices can be locked, security holes can be automatically remediated, and a wide variety of processes can be initiated to ensure the rapid and comprehensive protection of business IT resources. Core to initiating these processes is the establishment of a comprehensive and holistic visibility into conditions and behaviors occurring on the endpoint devices themselves. Endpoint detection and response solutions represent a classification of management tools designed to provide the visibility and automation necessary to respond to endpoint threats in real time. The basic functionality of the platforms is to continuously monitor and record the status and events on supported devices. Now, this would include a collection of hardware information and performance statistics, network details, kernel settings and registry keys, active processes, change events, installed applications, access privileges, log information, and a wide variety of other conditions on the endpoints. Policies can then be applied to any of these to immediately identify conditions that cross established thresholds or fall outside of approved configurations. Now, for instance, when a registry has been changed or when an unrecognizable privileged process has been executed, upon identification, alerts could be sent to, or automated responses can be executed to immediately remediate this problem or prevent the threat. However, some incidences are not so obviously identified. For instance, a single condition may not indicate a security breach, but multiple conditions happening simultaneously may be a sure sign that something inappropriate is happening. And this is when analytics steps in. Now, analytics is a computing process that identifies patterns in collected data. Some people refer to this as artificial intelligence, although that's not really an accurate use of the term. EDR solutions apply analytics to capture data either directly on the endpoints or after it has been collected in a centralized data repository. Another important advantage to utilizing analytics is to limit reported information to just the details you need to see. Now, for example, if your organization supports thousands of PCs and your EDR solution is continually collecting data from each of them, you would need an army of really bored technicians to constantly monitor the streams of data to see if anything interesting is happening. Or to say it in really a more realistic and common scenario, IT administrators are constantly inundated with so many irrelevant reports from automated systems and application monitoring platforms that they just stop reading them. As a result, when something important really is reported, then they completely miss the problem because they're not reading them. Analytics cuts through that white noise by only presenting relevant information that administrators can take action on. Again, responses identified by analytics can trigger automated responses to immediately and proactively close security holes and prevent problems before they become business impacting. While all EDR solutions perform some variation of data collection, analysis, and automation, they don't all do it in the same way. And we found that organizations seeking to introduce an EDR platform will typically recognize the general value of the approach, but are often confused by marketing terminology and lack of verifiable consumer information to make informed decisions on the best practices and optimal solutions that they should be adopting. So to try and help alleviate some of this confusion, we set out to conduct our own independent analysis of solutions offered by two of the leading providers today, Tanium and 1E. The exercise was intended to objectively call out the commonalities and differences of the two platforms in order to provide guidance on elements to look for in a solution that optimally fits each organization's unique requirements. Now, it's important to recognize that all businesses are different, and some points of comparison will be more applicable to some organizations than to others, which is why we strongly recommend that each organization begins their own evaluation process by identifying and prioritizing the features and capabilities most applicable to their unique business requirements. Our hope is in developing this particular comparison review is that it will indicate the specific questions you should be asking and the considerations you should include in your own evaluation. Now, to begin, here is the process that we actually use for our evaluation. We started by determining what we consider to be the most essential features and characteristics for an EDR solution. These determinations were based on survey-based research, discussions with IT management practitioners, and our own knowledge and experience with endpoint management and security best practices. Now, because we focused on identifying results for a general audience rather than on one specific company, our review focused on what we determined to be the most common enterprise requirements for endpoint security and management. And based on this evaluation criteria, we developed a detailed questionnaire that was submitted to both vendors in order to ensure the information we were reporting is accurate and complete. And any responses that we were provided back to us was carefully vetted before being included in our final report. Now, if you're planning to conduct your own evaluation, I would suggest it is not necessary to create a full survey like we did, but instead develop a set of key questions to ask when you speak to the targeted vendor's sales representatives. And then take lots of notes so you can compare the responses later. In order to ensure each product set in our evaluation was represented fairly, we only credited platform features and capabilities if they met the following rules. All features had to be genuinely available with the solution at the time of the evaluation, which was actually April of this year. This means that any features that were in beta testing or were scheduled to be included in later releases of the platform were not eligible for consideration. Also, all features must be self-contained within the included package sets. Any features that were not natively included in the evaluation package sets but available separately from third-party vendors for an additional cost did not qualify for inclusion, except where they were explicitly noted as points of integration. And finally, all reported features must have been clearly documented in publicly available resources such as user manuals or technical papers so that we could verify their existence and to ensure that they are currently and fully supported. For easy reading, we logically organized the results of our review into 7 separate categories, which I'm happy to share with you today. Each category chart presents relevant capabilities for each evaluated EDR platform with one of these symbols. A check mark means that the solution currently fully supports the capability. A circle means that the solution provider provides limited support for the capability, or that it is missing some key functionality or is unable to support the capability on all the endpoints. And of course, an X indicates the solution provides no support for the capability at all today. So we're going to begin with the category of server architecture. Now, like most EDR solutions, both Tanium and Tachyon enable platform configuration management and reporting from a centralized hosted server. Most organizations host the central server on a physical or virtual server deployed in their private data center. However, both platforms may alternatively be hosted on a public cloud infrastructure as a service environment. And 1E offers a SaaS edition that may be attractive to organizations with limited on-premises IT infrastructures, technical support staff, and related budgets. Tanium also offers a pre-installed, pre-contained physical appliance that may be easily installed in an organization's data center. A single Tanium server can support up to 400,000 endpoints, which sounds impressive, but the hardware requirements for supporting such a large-scale environment is actually quite costly. The server configuration would need a whopping 80 CPU cores and 256 gigabits of memory to support such a large environment, which can be very costly if you price it out. Additionally, the SQL database supporting Tanium actually tops out at 400,000 endpoints, so that restricts the number of supporting devices that a single instance of the platform can support. Now, by comparison, a single 1E Tachyon server can support up to 250,000 endpoints. However, up to 6 servers can be clustered to support up to 1.5 million endpoints in total. To provide a much more direct cost comparison, we actually priced out server architectures for each solution necessary to support just a modest 50,000 endpoints with a single server. And we discovered that the deployment cost of a Tanium server was roughly 3 times greater than that of a Tachyon server. So I'd certainly recommend budget-conscious organizations conducting a total cost of ownership evaluation on the deployment, infrastructure, and maintenance costs before settling on a particular solution. Our next category indicates how the EDR solution identifies and connects to the endpoint devices they are supporting. Both Tanium Core and 1E Tachyon have the ability to automatically detect the appearance of new devices on monitored networks. However, we noted that Tanium requires a number of manual configuration steps to make this happen. Administrators can also manually add endpoint devices to both platforms' asset database or automatically import that information directly from a listing service such as Active Directory or LDAP. Both platforms principally rely on the installation of a software agent on the supported endpoint to collect data and perform automation tasks. However, Tachyon can also perform some basic tasks agentlessly. To assist with the installation of the client agent, Tanium offers a client deployment tool, or CDT, allowing multiple remote endpoint installations. However, this feature is only currently available for Windows devices. Additionally, push installations and automated installations of the client agents are possible with Tanium clients, but by leveraging the WMI command line utilities, again for Windows-only endpoints, but it also leverages SSH for Linux and Mac endpoints. Tachyon administrators, on the other hand, can directly install endpoint agents from the management console either on demand or even automatically after they have been detected on the network. Now, once installed, Tachyon agents run persistently on the endpoints, continuously recording status information and performing assigned tasks. If the endpoint devices should be inadvertently disconnected from the network, the local processes will still continue running. It's just that obviously it won't receive any new instructions from the server until the network connection has been reestablished. While Tanium agents are also always active, the execution of tasks is dependent on access to agents on peer endpoints on the same network. Now, I realize this is something of a difficult concept to understand, so I want to actually go over the connection architecture in much more detail since it really calls out the fundamental differences between the two platforms. So I'm going to start with Tanium. To communicate between the server and the endpoints, Tanium pioneered what they call a peer-to-peer or P2P connection. Now in this approach, groups of endpoints on the same network segment are organized into what Tanium calls chains. Now this would be the PCs you see linked together in this graphic. Each endpoint in a chain is identified as a peer of other endpoints in the same chain. And Tanium can support up to 100 peers in a single chain. Now the first designated endpoint in a chain is considered the peer chain leader, indicated here as a red PC. Only a peer chain leader can communicate directly with the Tanium server. When an administrator on the Tanium console queries the status of a particular endpoint or sends it instructions, the server sends the request to the peer chain leader. The peer chain leader forwards the question to the next peer in the chain, who passes it on to the next and on to the next and on to the next and so on until it reaches the targeted endpoint device. The agent on the endpoint device provides a response to the question, which is forwarded to the end of the chain and back to the Tanium server. Now the central philosophy behind a P2P approach is that bandwidth over a local area network is much higher performing than over a wide area network or the internet. This is typically true because hops through firewalls, switches, gateways, and other network elements can actually impede the progress of packets distributed over a WAN. The P2P approach minimizes WAN traffic by limiting communications to just communications between the servers and the chain leaders. Communications between peers in the chain are occurring over the much lower friction of a typical LAN. As a result, under ideal conditions, Tanium's P2P architecture can provide extremely fast polling of supported endpoints. While the speed of Tanium polling responses is often cited as a key advantage of the solution, not all endpoint network deployments provide the ideal conditions to make this work. For instance, while it is essential for all peers in a P2P chain to be located on the same LAN, not all organizations are so neatly organized. Rather than supporting 100 peers, chains in small branch offices may only support a dozen or so devices. And the value of a P2P solution diminishes when supporting smaller chain groups because of the proportional increase in required WAN traffic. Now even more significant is the fact that laptops and other endpoint devices are more mobile than ever before and commonly move between business, home, and other remote locations. P2P solutions such as Tanium are only designed to support static endpoints that are connected to a fixed LAN. Even devices utilizing VPN connections cannot be effectively supported by P2P platforms because while VPN appears to operate on a local business network, they are still actually tunneling over complex and high-friction WAN networks. So you can think of the concept of Tanium chain not just as referring to devices linked together, but as devices permanently chained to a specific local network. Rather than relying on chains of endpoints communicating with each other, 1E Tachyon was architected to enable efficient direct connections between the server and the managed endpoint. Now these connections, high speed is achieved simply because client-server connections do not need to be reestablished for every connection event. Instead, the Tachyon agent initiates a secure WebSocket which establishes and maintains a direct connection to a Tachyon dedicated software switch. The software switch routes communication traffic between the server and as many as 50,000 endpoints simultaneously. While this approach also results in extremely fast communications and data collection, it is not subject to the constraints of having endpoints grouped into fixed network segments. So Tachyon endpoints can move with the users and operating environments anywhere in the world. An ideal EDR solution should really monitor and support all devices used in an organization. However, in recent years, end users have been granted much greater freedom in selecting the types of devices they wish to use to perform job tasks. As a result, we're now seeing a much greater heterogeneity of enterprise-supported devices than ever before. So the breadth of support an EDR solution provides for different types of endpoints can be extremely important in many organizations. Our evaluation indicated strong support for Microsoft Windows with both platforms, which is really not much of a surprise considering that Windows still continues to vastly dominate the enterprise PC market. However, Tanium has apparently discontinued support for legacy OS editions, including Windows XP and Windows Server 2003. Tachyon, therefore, will likely find a more welcome audience in the few organizations that still support these older Windows versions to support legacy custom-built applications. Both platforms also provide support for Apple Mac OS X endpoints, but again, Tachyon extends coverage to some older editions of the operating system. The most clear differentiation in platform support can be seen with mobile devices. Since the P2P architecture employed by Tanium is only effective on static devices that are continuously fixed to a particular LAN, the solution is not really designed to monitor and manage mobile devices or any device that is portable like a laptop. As a result, Tanium has no capabilities for extending the platform to smartphones, tablets, and other portable devices. Thanks to Tachyon's one-to-one connection architecture, 1E has been able to introduce broad support for mobile and other types of devices. The one noticeable absence here is support for Apple iOS devices. As we said, there's a rule that says if they don't have the capability today, we can't credit them for it. However, in our discussions during the evaluation with 1E, they've reported to us that they are actually developing an iOS agent which should be available shortly. While both solutions support a number of Linux versions, Tachyon extends support to a broader range of editions with added support for Debian and Fedora. For Unix support, both solutions can manage Oracle Solaris endpoints, but Tanium is able to extend support to IBM's AIX platforms as well. I should note that in our evaluation of both solutions indicated that not all capabilities offered for Windows and Mac devices were also available for Linux and Unix endpoint. So that's definitely something you'll want to keep in mind if those operating systems are important to you. As I noted earlier, security and compliance is the most common and critical driver for adopting an EDR platform. So most organizations will consider capabilities in this category of paramount importance. Both Tanium Core and 1E Tachyon provide features for scanning, identification, and reporting of endpoint vulnerabilities. However, Tanium only offers out-of-the-box support for Windows and Mac devices, so custom scripts would have to be manually written to support Linux and Unix systems with Tanium. Behavioral analysis is incorporated into vulnerability scans offered by both solutions that can analyze running processes, loaded libraries, drivers, and other system resources that may indicate anomalous states in order to identify evidence of compromised systems. Similarly, scans may identify the presence of malware by revealing questionable hash values, command lines, file paths, auto runs, and script interpreters. Although malware scanning is only natively supported for Windows and Linux endpoints with the Tanium platform. Should either Tanium or Tachyon determine a device to be vulnerable or infected or in some other way compromised, the solutions can automatically quarantine that endpoint so it is unable to access business IT services until it is remediated back into compliance. Security assurance and compliance reports can also be generated and customized by both solutions for detailed environment reviews and proof of compliance or SLA attainment. Additionally, both platforms can report on the existence of unapproved or blacklisted applications or block their use entirely. Common to both solutions are features for evaluating password vulnerabilities as well as creating and enforcing password policies. However, Tachyon offers some more advanced access management controls, including the ability to manage the escalation of user privileges, access to specific protocols, or permissions on specific files. The next category, service management and automation, covers capabilities for administration and orchestrating automated responses to identified states. Administrators for both Tanium and Tachyon manage their respective platforms via an HTML-based interface that is accessible from any web browser. Also common to the two platforms is the ability to customize dashboard views and to provide access rights and dashboard configurations for groups of users based on their job function or their job title or their department or some other common feature. We also identified comprehensive reporting capabilities with both solutions that analytically parse log information, system performance states, and any changed or non-standard registries or kernel entries. Upon discovery of a problem or incident, administrators of both platforms can remotely execute commands or scripts that may provide additional information or resolve the problem. However, Tachyon goes further to govern security remote access connections via RDP or SSH that are fully logged to ensure accountability. Also, while Tanium's approach is sequentially executed scripts locally on each endpoint, Tachyon is able to run tasks on the server rather than on the endpoint, so it substantially reduces performance impact on the supported devices while still enabling simultaneous task execution. Both solutions also support software asset management by automatically detecting and recording applications installed on endpoints as well as their current versions and patch levels. Now, but arguably one of the most important functional differentiators between the two platforms is how they automate administrative processes. Tanium utilizes custom shell and PowerShell scripts, which they call sensors, that are distributed onto the endpoints and then executed on demand. It is possible to parameterize Tanium sensors so that they will incorporate a variable at the time of their execution. Now, for example, the server may request the executable to collect information on any file containing the word, let's say confidential, by adding that variable as information on as a parameter to that particular executable. While technically this qualifies the platform as supporting custom scripting, we do not believe that this fully rises to the level of enabling IT process automation because it does not incorporate the interoperability features necessary to orchestrate multiple third-party tools and processes beyond the basic scripts and executables. Tanium also does not natively define and manage workflows, but it can leverage workflows for automating processes through direct integration with third-party service management solutions, specifically ServiceNow. By comparison, 1E has enabled automation in its platform with the included Tachyon Instruction Management Studio, or TIMS for short, which enables the creation of executables built using a proprietary SQL-like language called Scale. TIMS provides a sandboxed Tachyon agent allowing administrators to test their instruction sets in real time during the development process without impacting the production environment. Scale instruction sets can also embed, distribute, or execute any other scripting languages supported by the endpoint's operating system, such as PowerShell and VBScript, Bash, Python, and many others. This enables the development of much more robust and extensible automation instruction sets than Tanium is able to provide with its limited support included just for shell and PowerShell scripts. Tanium's ability to orchestrate complex automated tasks also enables the solution to achieve comprehensive IT process automation solution support. And Tachyon instruction sets can incorporate a variety of integrated points that directly initiate workflows for approval processes and other governance tasks. The ability of an endpoint detection and response solution to integrate with third-party tools and services is a prime indication of its extensibility. Now, both Tanium Core and 1E Tachyon integrate with directory services, including Active Directory and LDAP, to identify endpoint devices, determine user roles, and centrally acquire other enterprise IT details common to a number of management solutions. Asset and other service management information can also be enabled through direct integration with a configuration management database, or CMDB. And both Tanium and Tachyon currently integrate with the ServiceNow CMDB, but Tachyon also supports the BMC Remedy CMDB. Direct integration with ServiceNow's broader help desk and service management capabilities are also commonly supported by both solutions. However, Tachyon additionally offers direct integration with BMC Remedy and Microsoft System Center Configuration Manager. I should mention that when I use the word direct or direct integration, I'm talking about the platform's ability to access data or execute commands on third-party platforms without the need for administrators to manually build custom connections. And now, indirect integrations can also be established with the two platforms with the use of an API. For enabling integrations with third-party HTML-based web applications, Tanium offers a SOAP API, while Tachyon utilizes a REST API. Now, I know there's something of a religious war brewing out there over the two API approaches, but I'll share with you my brief take on the differences between the two. SOAP is an older standard that relies solely on XML messaging for communications, while REST can utilize a variety of different web services. In my experience, REST APIs are much easier and more flexible to manage, while SOAP APIs can be complex and less tolerant of errors. So you can see where I stand on that particular religious war, but I'll let you make your own determinations on what works best for your organization. Tanium and Tachyon both also enable integrations with third-party solutions utilizing syslog and command line utilities. Now, syslog can be particularly helpful in sending and receiving data with security and event management solutions such as Splunk or QRadar or Logarithm, while command line utilities are helpful with enabling integrations with third-party orchestration and automation administration tools. While evaluating management solutions, really of any kind, it's also important to evaluate the vendor providing those solutions. In particular, the long-term viability of a platform can be determined by examining the vendor's commitment and ability to providing ongoing support. Both Tanium and 1E include remote phone and email help desk support with the purchases of their respective platforms. 1E also offers on-site professional services for an additional cost to assist organizations with initial deployment, training, and problem remediation. I should note that actually while we were investigating and interviewing some of the current Tanium customers in particular, they actually reported to us that they found they had some dissatisfaction with the level of remote help desk support they were receiving from Tanium. Apparently Tanium would only provide support for issues proven to be defects with their product, but really didn't provide any assistance on how the platform could be utilized to improve their organization's environment or how to resolve problems in their environment. So I'm just sharing that with you, but to be fair, we did not do any kind of a statistical relevant survey to, amongst Tanium customers. This is just the impression of a few customers that we happen to speak to. So to sum it all up, Endpoint detection and response solutions are critical resources for addressing emerging requirements for achieving enterprise security, regulatory compliance, and endpoint performance assurance. In order to identify optimal EDR platforms, it is highly recommended that organizations carefully determine their unique business requirements and then strategically adopt platforms that best meet those predetermined criteria. And to summarize our own independent comparison evaluation of Tanium with 1E Tachyon, I have to say objectively that it was our opinion that it was pretty clear that Tachyon offers a much more flexible, extensible, and cost-effective solution than Tanium. And I'll add one more final thought to that. Tanium's introduction into the marketplace actually predates the introduction of the iPhone and then the subsequent mobile and cloud revolutions. So the platform's fundamental P2P architecture was never designed to address the more complex endpoint security and management challenges that we're experiencing today. Now, 1E Tachyon is a more recently developed platform that was specifically designed to support modern end-user computing environments. So I'll just offer this as my final recommendation, to adopt EDR solutions that focus on solving the problems of today and tomorrow rather than legacy requirements of yesterday. So with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Raleigh to drive us through the Q&A.
Great. Thank you, Steve, for that insightful presentation. As I mentioned, Steve did just release a white paper on this topic. There will be a link to access it in the follow-up email, so I hope you will check that out. Now I'm going to go ahead and jump into the questions, Steve. The first one is, what is the difference between an EDR solution and an endpoint management solution?
Oh, that's a good question, and I think this is another area where there's some confusion in the enterprise market space, and that's natural enough. I think since there is actually some crossover between the two technologies and their ability to monitor and report on endpoint conditions. However, an endpoint management solution such as a Microsoft System Center Configuration Manager or their cloud-hosted solution, Intune, will also include a number of additional capabilities such as operating system deployments, patching, software provisioning, as well as a full inventory asset and license management capabilities. EDR solutions are designed principally to provide rapid identification of problems and automate remediations. Since the processes in an EDR solution are much more targeted and they're architected for speed, they actually operate much faster, so they're able to respond to problems much more quickly than an endpoint management platform. I'll also say the scalability is a key differentiator between the two. Endpoint management solutions often support hundreds or thousands of endpoints in an organization, while EDR solutions often support tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of devices. It's actually not uncommon for an organization to adopt both an endpoint management platform and an EDR solution so that they can leverage the advantages of both.
Good to know. Thank you. Which of the two EDR solutions performs faster data collection? What did you discover in your research?
Oh, good question. Yes, I think that's a very natural question, isn't it? I mean, after all, Tanium achieved recognition and popularity specifically on its claim of lightning-fast data collection. And I'll presume your question is actually intended to compare the solutions under optimal conditions, meaning 100 PCs strategically connected to a LAN and not including portable devices or small satellite locations, which would really only be supported by Tachyon. However, the architectural documents that I've reviewed seem to suggest that Tachyon can provide higher speed responses even under these ideal conditions for Tanium, simply because Tachyon's proprietary software switch eliminates the need to repeatedly establish network connections while these negotiation processes are effectively amplified by Tanium's P2P chain. To be honest, I should note that I never actually personally performed a benchmarking test on the two environments, but my expectation is that Tachyon will surpass Tanium's performance under almost any conditions.
Thank you, Steve. Also, what considerations should we include in a total cost of ownership evaluation?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, and I talked about total cost of ownership earlier as one of the things that you should really look at if you're an organization that is budget constrained or budget conscious. Any TCO evaluation should include both what we call direct and indirect cost elements. Now, a direct cost element is anything you can put a quantifiable price tag on, such as solution costs, subscription costs, costs for maintenance, infrastructure costs, deployment costs, and let's say training costs. Really anything that you can actually put a numerical number attached to it. These are usually easily identifiable and actually can just be calculated in a simple spreadsheet. Indirect costs, however, are not so easy to quantify. Now, this will include elements such as the cost of administrative support staff, which will need to take into consideration things like an administrator's total compensation, percentage of time that the administrator is working with the platform's ease of use. So how productive are they? All these can be a little bit more challenging to calculate, but you can make some good estimates on there. Another example of an indirect cost would be the impacts to business performance while the solution is being implemented. If there's any downtime for users or disruption to the production environment, you'll need to take into consideration what costs there will be to the business. Again, you can make some pretty good estimates on that. And it can get a little bit complicated, but I really suggest it's a very worthwhile task because it provides a much clearer representation of what the introduction of a solution will actually cost the business over time. So you can make informed decisions when comparing products that are much more realistic than if you're just looking at solution license costs.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that insight. We are almost at the top of the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up today's event. As I mentioned, I hope that you will check out the follow-up email from EMA that will include resources from today's webinar. I wanted to thank you for taking time out of your schedules to join us today. I hope we'll see you at a future EMA event. Thanks again for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day.